Late March 2026. The conventional battle lines across the Middle East had temporarily frozen. But the terrifying evolution of asymmetric warfare was about to completely rewrite the rules of modern military engagement. Having witnessed the catastrophic failure of their highly touted multi-million-dollar hypersonic ballistic missile forces against the impenetrable shield of American-directed energy weapons, the deeply desperate Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps completely shifted their offensive paradigm. They abandoned the pursuit of complex, exquisite singular weapons and fully embraced the terrifying doctrine of overwhelming expendable mass. Hidden perfectly in plain sight, scattered across the bustling civilian maritime traffic of the Persian Gulf and the crowded, dusty highways of the southern Iranian coastline, a massive, highly coordinated covert operation was silently reaching its terrifying climax. Dozens of seemingly innocuous commercial container ships, rusting fishing trawlers, and unmarked civilian cargo trucks had been secretly modified into highly lethal mobile launch platforms. Inside these disguised transport containers lay the absolute ultimate realization of robotic warfare: an incredibly dense, highly integrated autonomous swarm consisting of over 5,000 upgraded Shahed 136 and next-generation Arash kamikaze drones. This was absolutely not a traditional, easily identifiable military formation that could be tracked by orbital satellites. This was a distributed, decentralized, and highly resilient robotic armada waiting patiently for a single encrypted digital execution command. The objective was the total, simultaneous saturation and catastrophic destruction of the massive United States Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the absolute beating heart of American air operations in the region, alongside the complete annihilation of the nearby critical desalination plants that kept the Allied nations alive. By attacking with an unprecedented volume of cheap, explosive-laden autonomous aircraft, the Iranian commanders calculated they could fundamentally exhaust and completely overwhelm the multi-billion-dollar American air defense networks. They aimed to mathematically drain the Patriot missile batteries of their expensive interceptors, leaving the incredibly valuable strategic bombers and thousands of military personnel completely defenseless against the relentless incoming mechanical plague. The silent countdown reached 0, and the containers violently burst open. The launch of the massive drone armada was a terrifying spectacle of synchronized mechanical violence. Thousands of solid rocket boosters simultaneously ignited in the pitch-black night, violently launching the dark, delta-winged drones from the decks of civilian ships and disguised coastal trucks directly into the humid ocean air. However, unlike traditional aerial threats that immediately climb to high altitudes for optimal fuel efficiency, this lethal mechanical swarm was explicitly programmed to exploit the fundamental, unavoidable physical limitations of the Earth's curvature. The entire robotic armada immediately dropped to an incredibly dangerous wave-skimming altitude, flying a mere 30 feet above the dark, choppy surface of the Persian Gulf. By hugging the terrain so aggressively, the thousands of incoming explosive drones effectively hid themselves in the chaotic radar clutter generated by the ocean waves, perfectly flying beneath the primary detection horizon of the heavily relied upon American early warning radar networks stationed across the Arabian Peninsula. More terrifyingly, these drones were not relying on easily jammable GPS signals or continuous trackable radio commands from human operators sitting in a distant control room. They were operating under a completely autonomous, heavily encrypted AI-driven hive mind protocol. If one drone detected a sudden topographical obstacle or a localized electronic jamming field, it instantly, seamlessly shared that critical telemetry data with the entire surrounding swarm at the speed of light. The massive formation dynamically adjusted its flight path, organically expanding and contracting like a terrifying predatory flock of metallic birds navigating the dark sky inside the heavily fortified combat information centers of the United States Central Command. The massive holographic tactical screens remained blissfully, terrifyingly clear for the first 20 minutes of the swarm's stealthy approach. It wasn't until the leading edge of the massive drone formation aggressively breached the absolute inner perimeter of the Allied airspace, triggering the short-range, highly sensitive acoustic sensors and optical tracking cameras mounted on the coastal perimeter fences, that the horrifying reality of the situation finally materialized. The alarm screamed with deafening intensity. The sudden, violent materialization of over 5,000 autonomous explosive drones perfectly converging on the Al Udeid Air Base triggered a frantic, absolute maximum intensity defensive response from the deeply shocked American garrison. The highly sophisticated multi-layered Patriot PAC-3 missile batteries, designed primarily to intercept high-altitude ballistic threats and advance supersonic fighter jets, immediately sprang into automated, desperate action. Massive radar arrays violently locked onto the leading wave of the swarm, and dozens of heavily expensive, highly advanced kinetic interceptor missiles roared into the night sky, creating blinding flashes of light as they successfully obliterated the vanguard drones. However, the fundamental, terrifying mathematics of this asymmetric robotic warfare instantly became catastrophically apparent to the panicked air defense commanders. The American base simply did not possess enough multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles to individually shoot down 5,000 incredibly cheap, expendable plastic and fiberglass suicide drones. Within a matter of agonizing minutes, the Patriot launchers clicked totally empty, their magazines completely exhausted, while the relentless, buzzing mechanical swarm continued to pour over the horizon like an unstoppable dark locust plague. The base's final close-in defensive line, the legendary radar-guided Phalanx CYWS close-in weapon system, desperately activated. The massive, multi-barreled rotary cannons unleashed a deafening, terrifying roar, continuously spraying thousands of depleted uranium rounds into the dark sky, literally cutting dozens of drones into shredded composite confetti. Yet even these incredibly fast, highly lethal defensive turrets began to rapidly overheat and critically deplete their massive ammunition drums under the unimaginable strain of the endless targets. Several heavily armed Shahed drones successfully managed to ruthlessly penetrate the desperate wall of lead, violently slamming into the hardened concrete bunkers and aircraft hangars on the periphery of the massive base, causing massive ground-shaking explosions that illuminated the panicked faces of the defending soldiers. The entire multi-billion-dollar American defensive paradigm was actively, visibly crumbling under the sheer, brutal, and totally uncompromising weight of overwhelming, expendable autonomous mass. Recognizing the absolute, imminent collapse of their traditional kinetic ground-based air defenses, the United States Air Force commander authorized the immediate, emergency deployment of their most highly classified next-generation aerial asset, the Collaborative Combat Aircraft (CCA) program. Hidden deep within highly secured blast-proof hangars, dozens of sleek, completely unmanned XQ-58 Valkyrie loyal wingman drones were instantly catapulted into the chaotic night sky. These were absolutely not the slow, remote-controlled predators of previous decades. These were highly advanced, stealthy supersonic robotic fighter jets piloted entirely by incredibly sophisticated, highly aggressive artificial intelligence algorithms. The American AI fighters violently engaged their afterburners, accelerating to supersonic speeds as they ruthlessly intercepted the massive Iranian drone swarm directly over the dark waters of the Gulf. The sky instantly transformed into a terrifying, chaotic, and unprecedented robotic dogfight, completely devoid of human pilots or physical biological limitations. The American Valkyrie drones operated with terrifying, flawless digital coordination, seamlessly sharing targeting data and executing impossibly high G, physics-defying combat maneuvers that would instantly kill any human pilot. They aggressively strafed the incoming Iranian swarm with highly precise, internally mounted directed energy cannons and rapid-fire rotary guns, tearing massive flaming holes through the dense, buzzing formation. The Iranian HiveMind AI desperately attempted to violently maneuver its kamikaze drones to avoid the devastating American counterattack. But the rudimentary programming of the cheap, expendable Shaheds was absolutely no match for the bleeding-edge, hyper-advanced neural networks controlling the supersonic Valkyries. The skies over Qatar literally rained burning fiberglass, shredded wings, and violently exploding lithium-ion batteries as the highly advanced American robotic fighters systematically and ruthlessly butchered the incoming enemy swarm. However, despite the breathtaking, highly successful aerial slaughter, the sheer, unimaginable volume of the initial Iranian launch meant that nearly 2,000 autonomous kamikaze drones still managed to survive the brutal aerial gauntlet, relentlessly continuing their terrifying low-altitude descent directly toward the highly vulnerable, completely exposed center of the massive airbase. With the surviving highly lethal remnants of the massive Iranian drone swarm now mere seconds away from physically impacting the incredibly valuable strategic bombers, fuel depots, and sleeping quarters of the Al Udeid Air Base, the American military command played their absolute final, devastating technological trump card. Stationed at highly strategic, elevated vantage points across the sprawling perimeter of the massive military installation were several heavily armored, completely inconspicuous shipping containers. At the exact critical moment, the roofs of these containers violently blew off, seamlessly revealing the tactical high-power operational responder, THOR, and the newly deployed Leonidas High-Power Microwave, HPM, directed energy weapon systems. These completely revolutionary next-generation defensive systems did not rely on firing expensive physical projectiles, nor did they utilize highly focused, narrow laser beams that could only target a single drone at a time. Instead, the massive, glowing emitter dishes aggressively angled towards the incoming buzzing dark cloud and violently discharged a massive, wide-angle, completely invisible wall of concentrated, ultra-high-frequency electromagnetic energy. The effect of this terrifying, silent weapon was absolutely instantaneous and incredibly devastating across a massive physical area. The invisible, highly concentrated microwave pulse aggressively penetrated the thin, cheap fiberglass hulls of the incoming Iranian kamikaze drones, violently interacting directly with their completely unshielded, highly sensitive internal flight control circuit boards and navigation processors. In a fraction of a single millisecond, the incredibly intense electromagnetic energy catastrophically overloaded the delicate electronic components, instantly melting the crucial silicon chips and permanently frying the lithium-ion power distribution networks. Unlike a kinetic explosion, there was absolutely no massive fireball or deafening bang. The terrifying, buzzing swarm of 2,000 autonomous killer drones simply simultaneously died in mid-air. Their spinning propellers instantly seized, their glowing red optical sensors violently flickered and faded to black. And the entire massive, highly coordinated mechanical armada was instantaneously transformed into a terrifying, unguided shower of completely dead heavy plastic and metal debris plummeting uncontrollably from the night sky. The deafening, terrifying roar of the massive drone swarm was abruptly, violently replaced by the chaotic, heavy sound of thousands of completely dead, utterly paralyzed plastic fuselages aggressively slamming into the desert sand, concrete runways, and reinforced bunker roofs of the American military base, because their highly explosive, impact-sensitive warheads required active, powered electrical fusing circuits to successfully detonate. The overwhelming majority of the crashed drones simply shattered harmlessly into millions of jagged pieces upon brutal physical impact, completely failing to inflict any significant, lasting kinetic damage to the critical infrastructure below. The absolutely desperate, highly coordinated, and completely unprecedented Iranian attempt to fundamentally overwhelm the American military apparatus through the sheer, brute force of cheap, asymmetric autonomous mass had spectacularly, publicly, and completely failed. The flawless, highly successful operational combat debut of the American high-power microwave directed energy weapons and AI-driven collaborative combat aircraft had permanently, irrevocably shifted the delicate balance of global military power in a single night. The terrifying era where rogue nations and non-state terrorist actors could cheaply threaten multi-billion-dollar superpower military installations with swarms of inexpensive, commercially available drone technology was officially, abruptly, and violently brought to an absolute end. As the bright morning sun finally rose over the heavily littered, debris-covered runways of the Al Udeid Air Base, military engineers and intelligence personnel began the massive task of sweeping up the shredded, burnt remains of over 5,000 completely defeated enemy drones. The undeniable, harsh geopolitical reality broadcasted to the entire world was absolutely crystal clear. The United States military had successfully, undeniably mastered the terrifying new realm of advanced algorithmic warfare. By flawlessly combining hyper-advanced, supersonic robotic interceptors with devastating area-of-effect electromagnetic microwave weapons, the American defensive shield had proven completely, utterly impenetrable. The desperate Iranian leadership, having exhausted both their elite hypersonic missiles and their massive, highly touted autonomous drone swarms, was finally left completely defenseless, utterly outmatched, and totally humiliated on the global geopolitical stage.